You and I don't disagree on the absolute Palestinian right to self-determination. Where I think we disagree is on how the world works.
When it comes to its role in the peace process, saying that it's an honest broker is silly and stupid. The United States is supportive of Israel, period.
What's the Palestinian strategy for getting the United States to see that it's in their interest to have a Palestinian state?
Palestinian state is in the American interest if America wants some kind of stability in the region.
There's a school of thought in the United States that says, well, actually, there's another solution to this problem. I'll just let the Israelis smash the Palestinians.
It is possible, but tell me something. Is it going to be successful?
I don't want to find out. What do you expect the Israelis to do? Anytime Palestinians have an election, they actually vote for Hamas.
Either you want democracy or you don't want democracy. We do not have the right to self-determination as any other people in the world.
Nasser Alkidwa, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity in general and giving me the chance to speak a little bit with you and to explain my point of views about a few important things.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So we should get started. What I've been doing in this series, particularly when I speak to Palestinians or Israelis, is I start by asking them about how they and their families are faring during this war. And the reason I do that is in part to remind our audience that the participants in this series, the Palestinians and Israelis in particular who are participating in this series, are not just disembodied minds or analysts or people who are on quote-unquote one team or another, but they're in fact flesh and blood human beings with families that are profoundly affected by this conflict and our collective inability to solve it. So, I know that you are from a very distinguished family in Gaza. I've often heard you referred to as the nephew of Yasser Arafat, although I will note that is not one of your main distinctions. It just happens to be a fact about you. But how is your family doing right now?
Well, yes, indeed. I was born in Gaza, as you said, which makes it natural to have personal linkage to the place. But my immediate family is not there because my parents have passed away. And my sisters, one of them passed away as well, and the rest, the three others, are outside Gaza. But of course, I have many cousins and many relatives in that place. And frankly, it was very painful. Let me tell you what was the most painful thing for me. The most painful thing for me was when somebody, a relative or a friend, would call and say, I need your help to get out of Gaza. Now, the problem here was that you don't want to empty Gaza. You don't want to be, participants in getting people out. And at the same time, you cannot tell them, don't do that because of the agony and the pain they are facing every day. And that was the most painful thing. I mean, the position that you have to take in this regard, to tell them, no, I can't do it. And probably I found the easiest way, quote unquote, easiest way, by telling everybody from the beginning, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to interfere. I cannot tell you what to do to get out or not to get out, but I don't want to be part of this. And, I can't even ask any friend from the Egyptian side or any other side to interfere in this regard. But it was very painful experience because of the amount of destruction, the amount of suffering people are facing there. And you can't really, with good heart, help them to get out of the place. And you cannot also tell them not to leave this place because of the suffering, as I said.
Yeah. That's a dimension of this that I think has been very hard for a lot of people to understand. So when, for example, the Egyptian stance with respect to Gazans and Gazan refugees is brought up, where Egypt has been very reluctant to allow Gazans into the Sinai or into Egypt. On the one hand, I personally have been quite critical of that decision because of the humanitarian cost, and especially since those residents who are allowed to exit end up having to pay quite exorbitant fees to transfer, to cross the border. However, at the same time, you'll hear from Egyptian diplomats who are very sincere that they don't want to be party, as you pointed out, to the emptying of Gaza. And so it's literally the dictionary definition of a dilemma. And so I profoundly sympathize with you there. Your Excellency, am I correct that you are not now in Ramallah? You are overseas in Europe, or are you back in Ramallah?
Not in Ramallah. I went back in Ramallah.
I knew that. Yeah.
Against any conventional wisdom in this regard, but I said, well, the situation is very bad. Let's see if we can get together and try to do something about that situation. But unfortunately, I didn't find any possibility for doing anything. So I left in a week time, very short period of time, and I didn't go back since then. And you can tell me that I'm closer to the opposition, to the actual situation, to the current leadership, than being a loyalist of or part of this leadership.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I do want to get into that. The reason that you left, obviously, was because of a difference with the leadership. But then I had read that you had come back after leaving in 2021. And so I wasn't sure where the status of your relations with the leadership are. But before we get to that issue, just to round out our discussion of Gaza, as you know, there was a ceasefire in October. We now have this board of peace. There is also Ali Shah's National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. As far as I understand it, all of this so far is just on paper. So can you tell us who is actually running things in Gaza now? The ceasefire, the much touted Trump-brokered ceasefire, has that held? And where is Hamas in all of this?
Well, the situation remains very bad, unfortunately. And suffice to mention that there are tens of deaths in Gaza in spite of the so-called ceasefire because of the Israeli military attacks against Palestinian civilians there. So there is no doubt that the situation is very bad. And you add to that the fact that Gaza is in fact partitioned. Half of it, almost half of it, a little bit less, is under the control of Hamas, and a little bit more than half is under the Israeli military control. So you can imagine how bad the situation is. Now, you mentioned the Trump plan and things that follow. And let me say this. I, for one, was ready to go along with Trump plan for the so-called 20-point plan, because of the suffering of the population, because of the feelings of our people living in Gaza, actually living in Gaza, and their desperate needs to change the situation, irrespective of how you might do that. So as a result, we said, okay, fine. The 20-point plan is a good plan, and let's go for it. Now, after that, we witnessed what happened. The so-called Board of Peace and the Executive Board and the liaison officer and the committee and, these kind of things. And frankly, what happened was the worst version of such possibility. For instance, the Board of Peace suddenly became responsible for the whole international situation. And there was very lengthy discussion about the fact whether this replaces the UN or not. What's our interest in that? I mean, we are a small player and we have nothing to do with that. We want a Board of Peace dealings with Gaza only. And
in other words, the Board of Peace became sort of Trump's body of powers that would somehow deal with all the problems around the world, that he would convene. Right. Got it.
Yeah,
or at least Middle East. Yeah,
that's what we all hear. And the bottom line is this, that we want a Board of Peace that deals with Gaza only, because it's not in our business. It's not part of our business to deal with the rest of the world. And whether this replaces the UN or not, this is something to be discussed apart from the Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
Now, the executive board suddenly became two executive boards.
Mm.
So you have one executive board that have all the non-Arab, non-brownish guys, and another another executive board that has these, including the people like the minister of foreign affairs of Turkey,
Mm.
the intelligence minister of Egypt, you know,
Mm.
a minister from the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and things like that. But this is the second one, which
Mm.
things. And then the guy who was supposed to be the liaison officer between the Board of Peace and the Palestinian Committee became actually the governor of Gaza.
Yeah, this is Mladenov?
This is Mladinov, who happened to be a friend of mine, and I told him directly, listen, governing Gaza should be left to Palestinians. And to my surprise, he said, yes, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happened was different. And finally, we have this committee headed by Ali Shahdat.
Yes.
They became Gazans committee, not a Palestinian committee dealing with Gaza.
Yeah.
So it became like a nationality or citizenship. Gaza.
Yes.
This is Gazan, and you are going to have Gazan committee. And frankly, the guys are nice guys, decent guys. They are technocrats. They are, including Ali. Ali, I know him personally, and he dealt with issues such as the preparation for airport and for seaport and things like that. But none of them, including Ali, has anything to do with the general affairs, with the political affairs. And that was part of the problem. When you say technocrat, it doesn't mean that, the litmus test is that whoever worked in politics should be excluded.
Right.
And whoever did not work in politics is welcome. I mean, you can't do something like that. I mean, you can say that you are not going to accept anyone because of some kind of political linkage or political dealings, but not this way. So we ended up with a very lousy kind of situation that will not happen.
What's the alternative that you would have accepted, or what's the alternative that you would have advised the Trump administration to pursue?
Yeah, that's easy. That's not that difficult. For instance, the Board of Peace should become Board of Peace dealing with Gaza only,
Okay.
and a Palestinian should also be named
to the board. But the membership of the board is fine.
Executive board, we need to have one executive.
Yeah. Okay.
Not two.
What would the executive board do in your framework?
No.
What's their role? So I just want to think functionally.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
No, but I'm asking you now. Nasser Alkidwa is going to...
executive boards? At least one executive board that is in reality deals with Gaza, because
got it.
The Board of Peace are contain people that are not are very busy and do not have enough time to deal with these things. So you can understand something like that, but you need one executive board and not two executive boards.
Sorry, just so our viewers understand, the role of the executive board would be what, basically? To hold the governor accountable? That's like the board of directors? In your view, I'm asking you.
What should be, or
what should be? What should
it should be a linkage, a liaison between the Board of Peace and the Palestinian Committee. So actually, it's some kind of supervisory kind of role.
Okay.
That plays a role which members of the Board of Peace cannot do because of their busy schedule.
Okay, and then
there are guys for that, and that's fine. And three, the liaison officer who became governor should not be governor, should come back to the original post of liaison.
So who's the governor?
Not the governor.
Who should be the governor?
A Palestinian guy.
From where?
Because from anywhere in Palestine, provided that he is not there because of the affiliation.
What do you
But
mean not there
because
because of the affiliation?
Hmm?
Sorry, what do you mean not there because of the affiliation?
Not because he is Fatah or he is Hamas
Ah,
or he is,
okay.
but it doesn't mean that somebody who has the qualification, even if he is Fatah, should be barred. It should not mean that, because there is a difference between saying that I'm not bringing anybody because of the affiliation, otherwise this will turn into some kind of, the same old bodies, the same old structures.
Mm.
But it's another thing to say whoever did some politics is barred as well. And we are taking guys who have nothing to do with politics and thus who cannot really do anything valuable in Gaza,
So,
which is now the situation.
I remember when the Board of Peace was initially announced, and in the earliest plan, the governor of Gaza was not going to be Nikolai Mladenov, it was going to be Tony Blair.
Yeah.
And I remember you had a very strong objection to that, along similar lines to the objection you're voicing now, that in your view, Gaza should not be handed over to some mandate, like one of the League of Nations mandates, but that Gazans should run it themselves. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, correct.
So can I push back with your permission on this? The natural response is going to be that the Palestinians have been spectacularly unsuccessful in governing themselves. And in fact, maybe what is needed is for there to be a period of some kind of international trusteeship that can apply good government and critically secure Gaza from and maybe make the kinds of credible commitments that the Israelis require in order to stop their bombardment and their military action. And so, how do you respond to somebody who says a Gaza that's governed by people from Palestine is going to be victim to all of the same dysfunctions that led us to the crisis that we are in? The Palestinian national movement is profoundly polarized. They have not demonstrated a capacity to work together. Why should we expect them to demonstrate that capacity now? And frankly, the stakes are too high to leave it to Palestinian politicians. And so, in fact, the best thing for those who want to preserve Palestinians' ownership of those parts of Palestine that they still own should welcome an international trusteeship as opposed to oppose it.
Okay, let's agree that we don't have an international trusteeship.
Right,
Because
but let's also say that you opposed it.
It should take another form, and you probably are going to have different steps, which did not happen.
Okay.
What we have is some kind of mixture that makes it extremely bizarre kind of arrangement that favors nobody.
Okay.
Like the Palestinian, no other. Secondly, I do not agree that the Palestinians failed, actually. The Palestinians failed maybe because of the strength, the ability of the opposing camp. Not only Israel is very powerful, but Israel is always aided by the United States of America, by any U.S. administration, unfortunately, irrespective of the position of the American public. You have this kind of arrangement. And actually, I can tell you that the Israelis played very important role in making sure that this experience fails and that the bad guys remain in power and that we don't have any accountability and that there is no democratic elections and that all these things are the responsibility of the Israelis, not of the Palestinians. You have Abbas because of the support of the Israeli government, because of the support of Mr. Netanyahu. You are having this kind of situation because of the fact that you are going to the fact that you have Israel and you have America behind Israel, and now you have the same thing. You have this kind of bizarre arrangements, and who pushed for it? Nobody knows. It seems to me, again, you have the Israeli hand and you have the American support. So it's not like you had the opportunity to do something and you squander the opportunity. It's not
Yeah.
true.
So Your Excellency, there's we're getting to this a little bit sooner than I wanted to, but it's fine. There's there's two lines of inquiry that follow from the claim that you just made, which is that the reason that the Palestinian leadership is so poor, fragmented, incapable of really governing the Palestinian territories, but also effectively advocating for Palestine's right to exist and to determine itself, is because the Israelis and the Americans are meddling and preventing the Palestinians from achieving that leadership, and the Americans are supporting them. There are two responses to that. The first is, well, what do you expect the Israelis to do when any time Palestinians have an election, they actually vote for Hamas, which is a radical organization that is committed to the destruction of the Jewish state. So, of course, it's rational for the state of Israel to want to deal with somebody like Abbas, who, all of his problems aside, at least isn't the kind of person who will plan for an October 7th. How do you respond to that?
I respond to that, either you want democracy or you don't want democracy. If you want democracy, you will go for elections and you accept the results of the elections. And of course, the guys, if they are bad, will fail again. And the elections after that, people will choose other guys, will choose other political tendencies. But you cannot have it both ways. You cannot have elections and then you give yourself the power to judge whether this is good or this is bad, and accordingly you act, and that is the problem.
Is
And
it
that's
that? Is it? But sorry, Your Excellency, is it that? I mean, I'm going to push you a little bit. Is it that unreasonable for the Israelis and the Americans to say, sorry, when your election brings to power an organization that has in its charter the destruction of the state of Israel, that talks about in its charter the day of judgment, when there will be a great war against the Jews, etc., that of course Israel can't sit idly by and accept that. And so when you do have an organization like Fatah that isn't saying that, sorry, let me just finish the thought and then I'll give it to you. There's an organization that isn't saying that, you do business with them.
why the Americans and the Israelis accepted the participation of Hamas in those elections to start with. Why they did not put some political conditions.
Mm. Mm.
Why they pushed for the elections. Let me remind you that it was President George Bush who spoke of the necessity of democratization and the fact that through democracy people will change.
Yeah.
And even terrorists, when they start dealing with health problems and with garbage problems, they will change and they will become responsible.
Yeah.
I mean, they did that, not us. They pushed for that. I mean, we didn't want elections to take place at that time, but they pushed for the elections to take place in the way it did take place, in the way that it happened.
Yeah.
And before that, let's also remember that the Israelis had unilateral deployment from Gaza. They called it
disengagement. Yes.
Unilateral redeployment from Gaza. And Sharon, then the prime minister of Israel, refused adamantly to cooperate with the Palestinian Authority in any way, in any means, which allowed Hamas to say, we liberated Gaza. So you are going for election against guys who liberated part of Palestine. That was crazy. That was insane. They didn't liberate anything. And by the way, it was us in the Palestinian Foreign Ministry who argued that Gaza remains occupied because it is part of the occupied Palestinian territory. And everybody got upset with us.
Yeah.
On the Palestinian side and on the American side as well.
Yeah. So, that's an important historical point that you're making. Can I ask if there were, the other line of inquiry would be that given that you have said that, part of the problem is the existing governing structure in Palestine, the long control of Mahmoud Abbas in particular. What do you say to those who ask, why hasn't there been concerted Palestinian action to actually demand something better? Your Arab countries and, like Tunisia and Egypt, you actually had people go to the streets and demand a different government. Why doesn't that ever happen?
And what happened in Tunisia after that?
Yeah, well, it didn't end well. Yeah.
Didn't end well.
Yeah.
So in Palestine, we had the same situation. There was a demand for better situation. And I personally led a list
Yes.
in the elections that was cancelled.
Yeah.
And I can even argue that the existence of the list and the existence of our presidential candidate was part of the reasons why the elections was cancelled, because these guys in power now, Abbas and cronies, they became sure that they are not going to win, that it was clear that they are going to lose, and if they are to lose, they canceled the elections.
Yeah.
And what happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, and everything was nice and dandy. So we have the support of the Arab regimes, yes, and we are appreciative of that. But there is also a baggage there. There is some problems as a result of that, as a result of geography, as a result of being, subject to the Arab wish and Arab will and things like that. But most importantly, it's the Israeli existence, the Israeli interference in our affairs, and the American support, the blind American support for the Israeli wishes and actions.
Okay, let's assume the Israelis aren't going to stop interfering in your affairs, and let's assume that the American relationship with Israel is going to remain strong. And I think both are pretty good assumptions. What can the Palestinians do to take responsibility and to build a genuine democratic alternative that credibly represents the Palestinian people and that captures international support as a movement that is worthy of advancing and supporting?
I think we can do things, as I told you earlier. And by the way, I had so many discussions with many officials in this regard, and one of them, I was pushing against corruption and the necessity for international interference, and suddenly he looked at me and said, "But we don't interfere in the internal affairs of anybody." I said, "Come on, you are telling me that? Now I know exactly what you did before that, so don't give me this line, and please just do your job." So I admit that the Palestinian situation is bad. I admit that there is a need for a change. I mean, there is no doubt about that. But there should be also an admission of the others' responsibility, and the need to change as well. Let's take the Israeli one more time. You probably heard the current Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, in his press conference speaking of the force, the power, and the virtue of the power over justice and over international law and things like that. He even said something like, Jesus Christ lost to Genghis Khan.
I didn't hear that, but I'll take your word for it. We'll check it later.
It's unbelievable. Yes, please check it. I mean, it was something like a week ago.
Okay.
A press conference, and he said things like that. I mean, when you really believe in power, and you don't care about justice, you don't care about international law, you don't care about, you know, the rules of conduct. There is very dangerous situation here. Where do you put the line? Where you draw the line? Where you stop in this regard? You are giving yourself the right to judge everything and anything, and you do whatever you want using the weapons that are given to you. It's not your weapons, even weapons that are given to you. It's very bad situation.
Well, okay, so you're describing a situation where you're saying your opponent or your adversary believes that might makes right. And I guess the question is, and you're saying that they are the beneficiaries of considerable support from the United States, without which they could not pursue the policies that they're pursuing. So what's the strategy? What's the Palestinian strategy for getting the United States and getting at least a critical mass of Israeli public opinion to see things your way, to see that it's in their interest, the American interest and the Israeli interest, to have a Palestinian state? What's the strategy? It can't just be my cause is just and that should give me a state.
Of course, you are right. And unfortunately, I have to say that there is no strategy at the current, as the situation stands now, because we don't have a responsible leadership and we don't have accordingly policies and strategies that are responsible and that they can take us to a different situation. So I admit, I admit that this is the reality. That's fact number one. But fact number two is also the fact that we need different kind of situation. If you ask me what should happen, I can tell you, for instance, that the United States of America is a great country. It's a big country. Nobody can ignore that. Nobody can deny that. But when it comes to its role in the peace process, saying that it's an honest broker is silly and stupid. And it does not reflect reality. It's not an honest broker. The United States is supportive to or of Israel, period. So you have to have them because they are superpower. But you need to have a group. You need to have a group that is responsible for the whole situation, for instance. And by the way, after Gaza, I think the position of the American public opinion is changing, especially with the new generations and the young guys and things like that. It's changing. Whether it will succeed in creating a different kind of situation, I don't know. I don't know America enough to judge the situation, but there is a possibility that this might happen even before Europe, because I think Americans are open-minded enough, are wise enough to see the facts and to judge things and to decide for themselves. So hopefully that this will be the case.
Those shifts in U.S. public opinion that you're counting on, they may absolutely deliver a divorce or at least a cooling of the close relationship between the United States and the state of Israel in the coming 5 to 10 years. But are they going to deliver a Palestinian state?
Listen, the state, by the way, again, if you take Israel, which is, very formidable foe, uh, there was strategic lies from the beginning. Because I remember, for instance, when I was young, the position was, okay, you have to accept the existence of Israel. If you accept 242, it will be the magical things and it will solve all problems and you can achieve your national rights then. And nothing happened.
Well, it's not exactly true that nothing happened. You got Oslo. which was a very concrete step towards the achievement of Palestinian national rights. It failed for a variety of reasons. The Israelis will have a narrative, the Palestinians have a narrative, maybe the real narrative is somewhere in between, but it's not like there weren't steps that were taken that actually got Palestinians closer to the achievement of their legitimate objectives, no?
No, listen, Oslo, to me, was an important step forward. But I think any Palestinian national has the right to ask why, for God's sake, the Palestinian people have to go through non, a governance ability, and this kind of experience that have benchmarks and they have tests and have examinations and have things like that. Why, among all people in the world, we do not have the right to self-determination as any other people in the world?
Do the Kurds have the right to self-determination? Do the Rohingya have the right to self-determination? I mean, you can rattle off a very long list of ethnic groups around the world that haven't been given as much of a right of self-determination as the Palestinians have.
That's not true. We are not ethnic group. We are more than that. We are a people. We are a people more than
just Kurds aren't a people?
Yeah, and the people should have the right to self-determination, and we were not given that right. Who else?
Your Excellency, you and I don't disagree on the absolute Palestinian right to self-determination. Where I think we disagree is on how the world works. You don't get a state because you can make an abstract argument about your right to self-determination. You get a state because essentially the board of directors of the world says, okay, this is in our interest. In your case, in the Palestinian case, it is the Israelis, a critical mass of Israelis are going to have to conclude that a Palestinian state is in their interest or at a minimum doesn't pose a dramatic threat to them. And so that's why the Oslo process had those benchmarks. And it's also why Israelis will say the Oslo process failed because of the Second Intifada, which resulted in spectacular violence that then completely undermined the peace camp within Israel. I mean, how can you? What is somebody getting wrong if they say that?
Since then, we didn't have Oslo back. By the way, now we don't have Oslo.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't have it because
an Israeli would say the reason you don't have Oslo is again because the Palestinians haven't done anything to make the Israelis feel comfortable with a Palestinian state. For example, we can move to your work with Ehud Olmert. Okay, so Israelis often point to two episodes. The first episode is with your uncle Yasser Arafat, Camp David and Taba, where the Israelis say, we made a great offer to the Palestinians and the Palestinians walked away from it. My own analysis of that, which follows closely the work of Jeremy Pressman and Robert Malley, is that actually they got very far at Taba, and then it was Barak who ended the negotiations, and then Sharon won, and Sharon didn't restart the negotiations. And so it's hard to just pin the blame on the Palestinians, although the Israeli argument is often that Yasser Arafat ordered the Second Intifada in order to prevent this because he could not agree, he could not allow himself to sign a deal with the Israelis that would give up the right of return of the refugees. So what's your response to that argument?
I think that's nonsense. And I know exactly what happened in Camp David. And in Camp David, Barak went there and did not negotiate. And at some point, the Americans even said that it was the Israeli responsibility, but then they didn't repeat that at all, actually, and they changed it into Palestinian responsibility.
But then you had the Clinton parameters, and you had Taba, which got much further.
Yeah, yes. You had Taba that was based on the Bill Clinton initiative.
Yes.
And it was actually the closest to reaching an agreement, which did not happen because of the Israeli elections then, because they went elections and Barak lost.
Right.
Barak lost the election.
But the argument is Barak lost the election because the second intifada was happening, and there was no Israeli support for a peace deal, or much weaker Israeli support for a peace deal at that point in time.
Well, probably you are right, but then
doesn't that put again some of the blame on the Palestinian side? That why hasn't
of course there is some of the blame on the Palestinian side, but it's not all the blame.
Yeah,
that's my argument. And by the way, I personally think, and probably Arafat also thought, that it was Rabin who was the leader of the change in Israel, and the one who was ready to reach a peace agreement with the Palestinian side. And it was, I went to Gaza a few days after the assassination of Rabin.
Yeah.
And I went to see Arafat. I found him very sad. And I stayed there. The room was empty. I stayed there for almost more than an hour, and he didn't utter a word. And I decided to leave. So, and on my way out, I told him, why you are that sad? After all, Paris is coming. The political position of Paris is even better than the political position of Rabin. So why you are sad? He looked at me and said nothing. But the meaning was clear. What do you know, you stupid guy? What do you know? Because, okay, maybe it's true that Paris' positions were better, but the guy who was able to carry the Israeli society was Rabin. It wasn't Paris.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, Yitzhak Rabin was absolutely a world historical figure who made serious contributions and the ultimate sacrifice for peace. But, if you read his last speech before the Knesset, he says two things that I think revealed that there was still quite a long way to go to the two-state solution. One of which is he said, look, we want to separate from the Palestinians. The Palestinians will have an entity that will be less than a state. That was the first thing he said. The second thing he said is we are not going to go back to the 1967 borders. Our borders will be beyond that. And those are two, I think, sticking points that historians have sort of forgotten about in our understandable rush to declare that the loss of Rabin was the key difficulty. I think there were a lot of difficulties ahead.
Why don't they? If they can get away with anything they want,
the
Israelis, why don't they? Actually, it's hard for any Israeli leaders to defend neutral, positive, reasonable positions against the ability of the Israeli state to do anything they want. When we are human beings. When we can do whatever we want, we do whatever.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. It reminds me of that line from Thucydides: the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must. And so, given your reading of the situation and the power imbalance, what that suggests is that the Palestinian leadership needs to be very clever to make the most of what limited opportunities present themselves. And so another opportunity presented itself in 2008 when your friend Ehud Olmert made a proposal to President Abbas for a two-state solution with significant acquiescence to the Palestinian sense of what the borders were, with some land swaps. And Mahmoud Abbas also did not accept that.
I don't know. First of all, let me say this. Let me say that positions of Ehud Olmert are positions that are respectable and we can deal with, and we should have dealt with. What happened exactly, I don't know. I knew that there was some discussion with the Israeli side, with the Israeli government, with Olmert, but I don't know what happened exactly. Now, later on, Olmert told me what happened, That was his version. But again, I'm not sure. But I think that with someone like Hud Almut or with this kind of position, we can reach political solution and we can have
No,
final.
100%. But that ship has sailed so far long ago that it's nowhere in sight. So, but the reason I'm bringing up that historical episode is because it is often brought up by people, defenders of the Israeli government's current conduct, to say, look, the Palestinians are never interested in coexisting with us, in having a state side by side with us. Instead, they're interested in destroying our state. And the proof is that when Ehud Olmert showed up and gave Mahmoud Abbas the deal of the century, Mahmoud Abbas did not respond positively to it. And, what is that story correct?
I don't know. As I told you, judging from what Abbas says, he says that there was no map. We didn't see a map. I asked him to give me a map, and there wasn't one. But
okay, let me ask you a different.
What happened?
Let me ask you the question slightly differently. Sometimes Israelis say that it's not that the Palestinian leadership didn't accept the deal, that we don't expect so much from the Palestinian leadership. It's that nobody among the Palestinian intellectual or cultural leadership criticized their leaders for not accepting the deal.
That's not true, because we didn't know that there was things going on, that there was negotiations going on. The proof is that even years after, when we had the opportunity to speak with each other, and others, I said, yes, I'm ready to sign something like this.
Yeah. And is your sense that the majority of Palestinians are there? Like, when Palestinians know that this was a deal that was put to them and it was not accepted by the Palestinian leadership. And Mahmoud Abbas has also, I think, answered questions about this in interviews. Do they get angry? Or do they say, no, good, I'm glad he rejected it because it didn't include the right of return for the millions of Palestinians who need to go to their homes in 1948 Israel?
That's not true. By the way, you said something like that about Arafat and about Camp David. That's not true, because my information suggests differently. The breaking points of the whole thing was Jerusalem. It wasn't the right of return. And the Israelis insisted on sovereignty over Jerusalem, and they proposed things like above the ground and under the ground, and things like that. It wasn't the refugees at all. And for Arafat, by the way, this is something that I didn't know either. I didn't know that Arafat spent very important 4 years of his life as a child inside the Haram, at the home of his grandfather, who was part of Al-Haram, Zawed Abu Saud. Abu Saud family had a place there, and Arafat was living there literally. He was playing balls inside Al-Haram. So for him, Jerusalem and the Haram al-Sharif and things like that was beyond political matter. It was something that really deeply connected to him. I didn't know that either. I knew that later on when we were preparing for the museum, that I started to understand the whole situation differently.
Yeah. So I guess the natural question is, I mean, again, I have just incredible admiration for you and for former Prime Minister Olmert for advancing the two-state solution that you have both been advancing with such eloquence and moral force. What do you say, though, to those who say that that is no longer realistic? If you look at public opinion in Israel, if you look at the leadership in Israel, if you look at the situation on the ground in the West Bank in particular with the settlements, it's just inconceivable at this point that you can get the kind of separation needed for a two-state solution.
It is conceivable the moment there is an international balanced position. And an international balanced position is euphemism for an American balanced position.
So in your view, your mind is, sorry, I interrupted you. Let me just ask the question, then I'll be quiet. So in your view, the Americans taking a balanced position, what does that mean? Does that mean they would pressure Israel to give up the West Bank?
Don't need to pressure anybody. It's just say that we are neutral. We are watching. We are not going to give you money and weapons and, complete political coverage in places like the UN Security Council and things like that. So there is no automatic protection anymore.
Okay,
So
and so then what would happen? Then what would happen?
Then what happened, the Israelis, being smart guys, will understand that they can't get away with anything they want, that they need to be reasonable, that they can't go on with their desire to annex the West Bank under the pretext that the Palestinians are bad guys. They can't do that.
Why not?
Because there will be a price for that to pay.
Which is,
Security Council resolutions condemning Israel, taking positions against Israel, posing some sanctions against Israel and things like that.
for the Israelis, that might be a price that they're willing to pay if they really believe, and I think they do, that ceding control over the West Bank will result in their ruin.
No, it's not that. Nobody really believe in that, but it's our right, our religious rights to get the West Bank on top of everything instead of the Palestinian, yes. So the real fight, the real argument is between those who believe in greater Israel, who wants everything, and those who are ready to compromise. And by the way, what Olmert and I said is the only possible solution if we are to look for one. If we are to look for one, the only possible solution is the two states. Otherwise, there is nothing.
Yeah.
There is nothing left for the Palestinians, and we are not going to disappear, by the way. And, pushing the Palestinians all the time and then ask them to be reasonable, ask them to understand the international situation, that in itself is not reasonable.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, Your Excellency. I don't know if I'm saying that the Palestinians need to be reasonable. I'm saying more that more strategic acumen is required. And so, the situation that you're describing is one where you are expecting the horrific images that Americans are seeing on their televisions of what Israel is doing in Gaza to further shift American public opinion so that it is more hostile, at least to the current government, and consequently adopts a much more neutral pose towards Israel. And you think that once that happens, decisions will take place in international fora that will advantage the Palestinians. But ultimately, there are two things that I think are cutting against that. The first is the strength of the state of Israel. Okay. Israel is the only power right now in the Middle East. It has demonstrated its capacity to project power, has the second most powerful air force in the region. It's people have been making this argument that it's a strategic liability to the U.S., and there may be some ways in which Israel's stances are a liability to the U.S., but it's also an asset to the U.S. So it seems hard for me to envision a complete U.S. divorce. But so there's the strength of Israel that militates against the future you envision. The second is the weakness of the Palestinians. The Palestinian leadership has not demonstrated a capacity to actually govern Palestine. Let's say there's a Palestinian state tomorrow. Everybody recognizes the Palestinian state. What is that going to be?
Okay, it's going to be a modern democratic Palestinian state, but anyway.
What's the evidence for that? What evidence have we given the world that the Palestinians?
I can't give you evidence, and it is not right for anyone to ask for evidence a priori. Because like any other people, okay, we want a better future for our kids, for our children, but it doesn't mean that we need to prove anything because, like others also, we have rights. We have divine rights that that includes the right to self-determination. I don't want to go back, but
but don't you have to show?
I mean, you mentioned, by the way, the strength of Israel and the fact that it's the second Air Force and second Air Force without having one plane made in Israel. What are you talking about? I mean, all this is something important from the United States of America, basically, and maybe before that, Europe, France, at some point with atomic energy and things like that. But it's all important.
I would bet there are some serious Israeli components in these planes.
They are good. They are clever. They are smart. They are hard workers. I don't deny that. But without exaggeration, also because they are smart enough to understand when the balance of power changes that they need to adjust as well. That they can't get away with anything they want. They can't get the West Bank at the same time. But when you send someone like Huckabee, who says publicly that they have the right of
take it all.
What do you expect? What do you expect? I mean, from any political leader in Israel, of course they have to say, well, no to the existing borders. We need more than that. But I'm not sure what the American administration, successive administration, is doing is actually in the interest of the Israeli people in the long run. Because, you might be powerful, you might have very powerful Air Force and things like that. But at the end of the day, are you part of the region or not?
Yeah.
Are you really genuinely acceptable in the region or not? I think this is the main thing. You need to melt in the region. You don't need to be the powerful force that imposes its will over the others.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it's clear now that those in Israel who want to have a more productive relations with other Arab countries are realizing that the impasse with the Palestinians is a barrier to that. I guess you spoke about how this is then you spoke about consequently how not having peace with the Palestinians and two-state solution is not in the Israeli interest over the long run. If you were sitting down with President Trump, though, how would you convince him that a Palestinian state is in the American interest?
Palestinian state is in the American interest if America wants some kind of stability in the region, want peaceful and stable situation in the region. As such, you cannot achieve that without solving the Palestinian issue, including having a Palestinian state. It's as simple as that. You cannot
I'll just keep getting October 7th?
Not necessarily, but you are going to have other kind of troubles because you are going to have wars, because you are going to have inability to normalize relations between the Arab regimes, the Arab countries, and Israel. For instance, again, why someone like me was not supportive of the Abrahamic Accord? Not because it includes having relationship between some Arab states and Israel. It's only because of the fact that it was conceived as an alternative to solving the Palestinian issue. And that's why it failed. It can't succeed. But if you solve this, you can magically have really, seriously, Abrahamic Accords with everybody in the region and beyond, and Muslim countries as well. Now you have Indonesia promising to send 20 or 40,000 soldiers, and then they change their mind. It's not happening. Why? Because of the internal public opinion, because of the opposition in Indonesia. It's not going to happen.
So two things. So in response to my question, how do you convince the Americans that it's in their interest to have a Palestinian state? Your answer was basically that it's in their interest if they want stability in the region, because otherwise this conflict is going to keep on rearing its head and producing instability. There's a school of thought in the United States, and I think it's reflected in the statements of somebody like Mike Huckabee, that says, well, actually, there's another solution to this problem. I'll just let the Israelis smash the Palestinians. Just let them smash them and end this problem once and for all. The only thing that is protecting you from that outcome is the fact that the Americans haven't given them the green light. Isn't that a possible path that they could take?
It is possible, but tell me something. Is it going to be successful?
I don't want to find out.
I don't want to find out either, but it's not going to be successful because, yes, they will be smashed for a few years and then they will rise again. Because you cannot deal with people this way. You cannot expect that you are going to obliterate them. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's right to ask for things. I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
Yeah.
But, try to be nice about it because not every single Palestinians understand international politics and international situation. And many of them just asking, why us? Why only us? I mean, why not the Israelis? Why we are not dealt with as any other people, normal people in the world?
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely complain about that, and it certainly we would certainly have a right to be bothered by it. But I guess a theme in this conversation is that you have to deal with the world as it is, and you win a state not by making moral arguments, but by
like you understand that.
Yes.
But I'm saying let's try to put it in a way that is understood and acceptable to average Palestinians.
Can I just also just get you to reflect on the strategic situation that you're facing? You referenced Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who, in response to a question from an interviewer about Israel having a right to the entirety of the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates, the American ambassador said it would be fine if they took it all, and then only adjusted his statement to say, but the Israelis don't want that, as if Israel's interest or Israel's desire is the only thing that is a reasonable limit on their right to capture the whole Middle East. What happened to that guy? He's still the ambassador. And the Arab countries raised their voices. They got up, they sat down, they said all kinds of things. Nothing changed. And so that, to me, suggests you are in a situation where the identification of the major superpower that you have said is the key to this problem, their identification with the leadership in Israel now is almost total. So if you want to get somewhere, you can bang your head against the wall, or you can face reality and try to make the case to Trump that a Palestinian state is in the U.S. interest. And I'm not hearing an argument except, yeah, if you don't give us a state, we're going to do more October 7th. Well, there's another solution to that.
No, I didn't say that at all. And yes, I told you, for instance, that we accept the 20 points plan of Mr. Trump, and that we want to see it implemented. And we want just to have adjustment to the current structure. All this is going in the direction that you described. By the way, with regard to Mr. Huckabee is not the U.S. administration. Mr. Huckabee is an important part of the coalition that makes the American administration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Christian Zionists, things like that. We all know the story here.
And there's a lot of them.
And things like that. There is a lot of them, yes, and they are important. There is no doubt about that. But even them, they are changing. You have generational change and things like that. So they are important, yes. But this is not the administration. We need to deal with the situation generally with its complexity. There is no doubt about that.
I think that's a really excellent point, Your Excellency. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is that all of these shifts in American politics that you are describing will not amount to very much for the Palestinians unless the Palestinians on their side develop both an argument for why their self-determination is in the world's interest, in the U.S. interest, and the capacity to govern themselves. And these things have to be achieved in spite of all of the obstacles that you say the Israelis are throwing in your path. Those are just conditions you have to deal with. And so, you may be detecting a degree of frustration in my questions only because I truly believe, the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian right of self-determination is self-evident. And the cause is incredibly just. It's been a cause I have truly believed in since I was a little kid. But it has leadership that has demonstrated itself spectacularly and criminally unable to deliver on one of the most just causes that we have. And so the question I have for you, and before we open it up to questions now, is what can the Palestinians do to achieve the renewal necessary to be able to make their case credibly to the world and to actually be able to win the self-determination that you and I both think they deserve?
The difficult goal should be to get rid of the current leadership.
How?
Replace it.
Intifada? Intifada?
Now, how we tried the democratic way. We tried elections and we were ready to participate in the elections. And then it was canceled. And, we tried other things. We tried the pressure, direct pressure, such as statements and demonstrations and things like that. It didn't work either. So I don't have answers, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have been engaged immediately in the implementation of those answers. But we need to do that. Now, part of the problem, as I said earlier, is the fact that these guys, this kind of leadership, is supported by the Israeli government. And there's no supporter of Abbas and of Hussein al-Sheikh and cronies more than Ehud Olmert, unfortunately.
You mean Netanyahu, you mean?
Netanyahu.
Yeah. Could have been a Freudian slip. Look, I think, we're not disagreeing that Netanyahu is not making the task easy. But would you agree that in order for Palestinians to bring about an end to their external occupation by Israel, they first need to act to bring about an end to their internal occupation by the autocratic Palestinian Authority?
Absolutely. I always say that an important part of the problems we have now is the inability of the Palestinian leadership to do the right thing and to take positions and to argue, to make arguments and to push things in the right direction. I mean, part of our agony is the internal Palestinian situation, and taking care of this is the conditions number one, sine qua non, for any other things to improve.
Okay, so Your Excellency, I want to open it up now to our very patient audience.
Until now, that was only you, so you can imagine.
Yeah, and we won't take up too much more of your time. But so I have some people have put questions in the Q&A, but if you'd like to ask a question directly of His Excellency, if you just raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand feature, I can call on you and unmute your microphone. And so while I'm waiting for people to raise their hand, I have a question here in the Q&A from Irv Plotkin, a very good friend of the Middle East Initiative at the Kennedy School. And he says, could you talk, Your Excellency, about the right of return and whether Israel can be a Jewish state if that right of return were exercised?
Well, listen, I can tell you that there hasn't been any serious debate about this issue, neither in Palestine nor in Israel. And the reason is the fact that there was no serious opportunity to reach a settlement that requires solving these important issues, including the right of return, so-called right of return. But I can tell you this, we need to deal with respect of the refugees. We need to give them their rights, but we also need to understand that there will not be flooding of population, flooding of people in a way that would change the character of the Israeli state, of the Israeli society. So that much is clear in my mind. It's not going to happen.
So, in other words, you may be a symbolic right of return where some of the descendants of those who were expelled in 1948 get to come back to their homes, but nothing that would challenge or threaten the demographic balance in Israel.
If you insist on that, yes.
Well, the Israelis are going to insist on it. And so I guess, I can see a bunch of Israelis listening to this conversation and their blood pressure rising because even somebody as progressive and as committed to two states as Nasser Alkidwa is not willing to just state it very clearly, to just say to the Palestinians, we have to give up on this idea of a right of return. We're not going back.
I stated it very clearly, but you insisted on making it even clearer. That's a different story.
Why is that a problem?
Because I'm not negotiating with the Israelis here. So I don't want to say things that...
Yeah. But that's a very interesting point. Your point is like, Tarek, this is a negotiating card in my hand. I'm not going to give it up in an interview in the Harvard Kennedy School. But what would you say to somebody who says, no, actually, if you make it clear from the outset that would have an effect on shifting Israeli public opinion? Because right now the Israelis, the ones who want to undermine the peace camp, they say, you will never find a Palestinian who would give up on the right of return. They all want it. And if you came and said, no, I'm a Palestinian who wants my state in the West Bank and Gaza, and we have to give up on this idea of the right of return, it's not going to happen. I don't call for, maybe you could touch the hearts of some of the left-leaning Israelis who feel they don't have a partner.
Maybe, but you have also Palestinian consideration. And by the way, I'm not stupid. I know that why you are going to have a state if you want a right of return. If we are going to have a right of return, we don't need a state.
Yeah.
We'll have everything. We'll have the whole thing. So it's clear. It's clear what you are saying, and it's clear what I am saying, but we'll see.
So I want to get another question here, and for some reason nobody's raising their hand, but I have a question here from a senior research fellow at the Middle East Initiative, Barak Sella, who actually wants to get you to reflect a little bit on the war with Iran. And yesterday here at Harvard, one of our colleagues hosted the Israeli journalist Amit Segal, and what Amit Segal said is that Hamas is effectively, an Iranian proxy. It represents 2 Iranian divisions on Israel's southern border. Hamas represents 6 Iranian divisions on the northern border. If you have a future Palestinian state, how can you ensure that it's not just going to be a place that plays host to more IRGC divisions?
Well, it seems to me that the war itself is the reasons why people are not raising their hands. But anyway, do you want me to talk about the war in Iran, or you want me to talk about Hamas and Iran?
Well, either his question was about Hamas and Iran, that basically your state, if it ever came into being, would be a staging ground for Iranian attacks against Israel or Iranian mischief making against Israel. But you can answer or any question you like.
Listen, I'm not sure that Hamas is stooge of Iran, by the way. And I think that we Palestinians differ largely from the Iranians, and we prefer largely to be part of the Arab camp generally than the Iranian camp. We differ religiously, we differ politically, we differ culturally, many ways. But at the end of the day, it's hard also to tell Palestinians do not support those who are fighting the Israelis because it's not good for your cause. That's my argument. I'm here trying to be very frank with you. But I think we need to wait a little bit and see where are we heading in this war, because it's very important. Now, what we have in the war is a situation whereby you have an absolute military superiority. by the Americans,
Hmm.
supported by the Israelis or followed by the Israelis or whatever, and Iran. But you have also a regime that used its tools in a very effective way, causing some serious problems.
Hmm.
The whole world, including the economic situation and things like that. What's going to happen? Honestly, I don't know, and I don't know because of the impossibility of having a scientific analysis of the situation, given the facts that we all know. But if I am to guess,
Yeah.
and that's not going to be even educational guess, it's less than that. I would guess that there will be no agreement.
Hmm.
There will be unilateral declaration of victory and withdrawal by the
President
United
Trump.
States. And then there will be some kind of transition whereby many parties, including Arabs, will exercise pressure on the Iranians to moderate their positions and to become part of the political game, if you wish. I think that is more reasonable than assuming that there will be an agreement or assuming that there will be an increase of hostilities towards really a new level of war. I don't think that we are going to have these. And even if we have the second one, we are going to go back to no agreement outcome, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about this conflict is many people point out that the bar for victory for the United States is very high, and for the Iranians, it's quite low. For the U.S., they need to regime change. They need, to get the 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium somehow, whereas the Iranians, all they need to do is survive. I think they misunderstand Trump. Trump for Trump to achieve victory, all he has to do is declare victory, and his supporters will be happy.
Agree. Yeah.
And the opponents of the war will be so happy that the war is over. They're not going to fight him on it. So people aren't, I think, recognizing that. So a question from another Middle East Initiative colleague, Professor David Mednikov of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. He says, the Israeli-American war with Iran has provided cover for the Israeli government to proceed, I'm quoting him here, with its anti-Palestinian policies and distraction from the Palestinian issue generally. Is it possible, he's asking, that the end of this war would shuffle the political deck with respect to the Palestinian situation? If so, how? I assume he's asking, once the war is over, does that remove the cover from the Israelis for pursuing some of their policies?
I don't know, and I don't think so.
Yeah.
The policies are there, and the Israeli government will push for it, and we will see the result of the next elections and things like that. So there are so many unknowns in the cards that we can't be clear at this point.
Yeah.
But I think the Israeli government is not in good shape either.
Yeah.
Because of the war. And you look at Lebanon, for instance, they thought that it's going to be easy, it's going to be just a quick adventure, and now it's turning into another war.
Yeah.
And is causing some serious losses on the Israeli side as well. Now, everything is relative. Of course, there is broad
captured Lebanon all the way up to the Litani River, and they're evacuating it. If you read the New York Times today, they're evacuating it of Shias.
They are bombing the capital, and they are bombing especially the southern part of the capital. So, yes, the situation is horrible. There is no doubt about that. But everything is relative. So there is a situation that was surprising. Let me put it this way: Israeli government they did not expect Hezbollah to remain a formidable force or a force to be reckoned with, if you wish, as it is now. What's going to happen? Again, I don't know, because of many reasons, including the fact that this Israeli government is unreasonable government. I mean, for instance, who would want the continuity of any war for the sake of the continuity, except Mr. Netanyahu, because of his personal interest?
Yeah.
He wants this to continue because without this, his neck might be at stake. I mean, he might go to jail.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be easy. It's going to be very unpredictable, and we will see what's going to happen.
Okay, we have two people with their hands up, and so I'm going to call on the first one. Is Roy Schwartz-Tichon, and so he will ask his question very briefly. Go ahead, please, Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Alkidwa, for being here. I wanted to ask for free and fair elections without interference from the US or Israel. And then Tarek, Professor Masoud responded that would bring Hamas to power. So then you corrected for elections with interference of Israel and Americans that would make sure that nobody you don't support can run and who you support can win. Aren't you asking for dictatorship just for your party instead of free and fair elections?
Okay.
No, of course not. I'm not asking for dictatorship. But it's only reasonable. I remember a discussion that I had at the time of the elections that brought Hamas into, and my argument was that we need to say very clearly that this election is part of the Oslo process. It's election for the Legislative Council, and nobody can participate without being supportive of the process, supportive of the political framework that brought everybody in. That where is the dictatorship in this? I mean, that would be different. But then to allow them to participate, and after being elected, you tell them no, you cannot govern. That is the dictatorship, and that is what I criticized in my intervention.
Your Excellency, when people talk about Palestinian leadership, I'll say two things. First of all, as evidence from just our conversation with you, Palestine does not lack for individuals who have a tremendous leadership capability. One of the people that is often talked about is as a potential leader is Marwan Barghouti. And so I have a question here from another Middle East Initiative fellow, Dana Schleifer. She says, lots of people talk about Barghouti as an alternative. And in fact, we did have Ehud Olmert here, and he was asked about this. And he said Marwan Barghouti is a big unknown because he's been in jail for 20 years. Can you tell us, what do you think about these the hopes that so many people have placed in Marwan Barghouti as a kind of Palestinian Mandela? What is it about him that makes people gravitate towards him? And what should we look for to determine whether, in his past statements, whether he is actually the kind of forward-thinking leader that is needed? Or do people just talk about him because it's, as Dana is saying, anybody but Abbas?
Well, I think he is an important guy. There's no doubt about that, and he is a force in the Palestinian situation. There is no doubt. But I also think that he was not actively involved in attempts to reorganize the Palestinian situation.
Mm-hmm.
Probably he calculated too much. But then when we'll see, because if he is to be freed, he will have the opportunity to explain himself and to run for elections and to put a program and things like that. So we'll see what's going to happen if he is released.
All right. I think we have time for one more question, and this will be from Middle East Initiative Senior Fellow, Dr. Youssef Shahid.
Can you hear me like that?
Yes, Your Excellency. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Masoud. Thank you, Professor Alkidwa, for your presentation. You mentioned the importance of internal political dynamics in Palestine, with the fragmented leadership, the lack of electoral legitimacy, etc. what would a credible political renewal process look like under current constraints?
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
In an ideal world, you are going to have elections, democratic elections, and whoever is elected will be the new leadership. But this is not happening. This actually is being blocked by the current leadership that is being criticized all the time. So again, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be democratic, really, in the real sense. But it's going to be a mixture of things. It's going to be a mixture of things, and we'll see what's going to happen. But unfortunately, the elections, which would have been the easiest way forward, is being blocked.
Should Hamas be included in a future political process, or does progress on the Palestinian portfolio require Hamas finally to withdraw from the scene?
Listen, more than 2 years ago, I wrote an article in The Economist, and I said that this war will lead to important changes, including a new Israeli government, a new Palestinian leadership, and a new Hamas. Hamas has to give up its arms. But, for this to happen, you need some kind of dialogue. You need some kind of give and take. It's not you have to do 1, 2, 3 or nothing. So probably it's going to be nothing. And if you ask me whether things would go on as proposed now, my answer would be no, it's not going to go forward. But it was possible. We could have moved forward if we had the right dialogue and the right discussion and the right people and the right. But it has to give up its arms. It is correct. But part of the deal should be the ability of its current members to become members of a different party, of a different movement, of unarmed movement that believes in the political work. So this way they could participate in the process without actually keeping the current criteria or the current characters of Hamas. This is something, we like it or not, you can't have a solution without.
Yeah.
Can't have a solution without, because Islamic tendency is also an ideology. It's ideas. You can't just fight ideas.
Yeah.
You have to give them the opportunity to participate with conditions, with certain rules to follow. Yes, but the way should be open and the door should be open for them to participate.
As long as they are disarmed and have renounced violence, in your view. So I want to close. We're at the end of our time, and I just want to close by circling back to some of the really tremendous work that you are doing with Prime Minister Olmert, and God willing, we will have you and the former Prime Minister back here at Harvard for more discussions. But I've been pushing you to explain to the Americans and to explain to the Israelis how a Palestinian state, Palestinian self-determination is in their interest. I want to close by getting you to tell me how you would explain to many Palestinians and Palestinian well-wishers that a Palestinian state and a two-state solution is in their interest. What I'm often hearing now, particularly from young people, is that the two-state solution is no longer viable, and what Palestinians should be calling for is for equal rights in the land between the river and the sea. This is the one-state solution. What's the argument you make to a Palestinian that no, our own state in the West Bank and Gaza is more in our interest? It is better for us than one state between the river and the sea.
It's better for us because the other solutions are dysfunctional. They're not going to happen. They are dreams at best, and they are lousy dreams at worst. So, for instance, you take one state solution. I don't think that there is something real that can be called one state solution, because there is contradiction even in the term one state and solution. You can't have a solution with one state, because the one state requires the absolute victory of one party over the other. If the Palestinian wins, you are going to have a democratic state, Palestinian state, democratic state that has some Jews living along with Christians and Muslims. If the Israeli wins, you are not going to have a one party, one man, one vote system kind of system. You are going to have a Jewish state with some minority, Muslim minority, that works as slaves for the Jews. So there is no solution there. There is victory. There is submission by the losing party. The solution should be based on some kind of understanding, some kind of negotiations. And the only possible solution is what we propose, that is the two-state solution. Called Olmert and I, the two-state solution based on 1967 borders, was some exchange of territory in this regard. So again, I don't think, by the way, that most of the people who would tell you that we don't want two-state solution really means that we don't want the national state, we don't want the national identity, we don't want the national existence. I think it's basically some kind of position against the failed peace process, the failed negotiations after negotiations that led to nothing. That it's a position against the current leadership, political leadership. It's not a position of something against the political national identity. And I insist that this is true. The proof, if you ask them, the same people, if you ask them, are you against the Palestinian state? Are you against the Palestinian sovereignty, the Palestinian independence? They would tell you, of course not. I'm not against that. But it's not easy. It's difficult. How it's difficult? And yeah, this is difficult, but the one state is easy. Come on, give me a break. It's much more difficult, of course, than what you are proposing.
It's so fascinating. There's so many threads to pull on there. It was interesting how you described the two possible one-state scenarios, one of total Palestinian victory, which you described as being a democracy with some Jews, and the other of total Jewish victory, which you described as being a state where the non-Jews would live in slavery. People could really object to that. I think one of the interesting...
Why you would object to that?
Object to just the asymmetric characterization.
Listen, take the people in 1948, take Palestinians.
Yeah.
They are nationals, but they don't join the army. They can go for elections and they can become the members of the Knesset, all right?
And they could join the army if they wanted.
Wait a minute. And then take East Jerusalemites.
Yeah.
They have blue card. They are not allowed to participate in elections. They are not allowed any rights similar to their brethren in 1948, which indicate that the Israelis learned the lessons. What they did in 1948, they did not repeat in 1967. They didn't even use the term annexation to avoid giving those guys same rights. So now tell me, please, what kind of rights you envisage the Israelis giving to the guys who are staying in the West Bank in light of this experience?
Yeah, no, look, let the record show that we were talking about a hypothetical scenario, and you were painting this hypothetical scenario by way of showing how unworkable the one-state solution would be. I mean, but it is the case that if you are an Arab citizen of Israel, you have equal individual rights as any other Israeli.
No, you don't have equal. You don't have some rights.
Okay, we're not going to be able to have this conversation, but I think the fact that this came up just again illustrates some of the depths of the disagreements here, and is another indicator of why two states side by side with good fences, making good neighbors, is probably the only solution to this conflict in our lifetimes. Nasser Alkidwa, I am extraordinarily grateful to you for spending time with us and for answering my sometimes impertinent questions. My only regret is that we are not doing this face-to-face, because I would love to show you some hospitality and also have the opportunity, create an opportunity for our community to meet you. But inshallah, we will do this again in the future in person.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And we will see you soon, inshallah.
Thank you, and thank everybody, and thanks even Harvard University, and all the best to all of you. And yes, hopefully we'll meet face to face.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
This has been a presentation of the Middle East Initiative at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider sharing it, clicking like, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, where you can find other installments in this series of Middle East Dialogues. To learn more about Harvard's Middle East Initiative and what we're doing to promote open inquiry on the region, please visit our website at hks.harvard.edu/Middle East. Thanks to the Kennedy School and the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. And thank you for watching.